完咗之後咧，我先至同你頭先俾我睇嗰啲嘢咧，我先同你再睇嗰啲信咯。
Hello and welcome to the China Daily Asia Roundtable webinar. This is a series of Zoom webinars that we've been doing over the last few months during the time of COVID-19. Now, in this edition, we are talking about taking the show back to the theatres in the time of COVID-19. We have with us four excellent speakers. Let me go through them very quickly. Mr. Albert Lee, the Executive Director of Hong Kong International Film Festival Society. Mr. Lo Ki Hong, the Head of Theatre at the West Kowloon Cultural District Authority. And Mr. Tung Kun, the Curator of the Taipei Arts Festival, as well as Mr. Fred Wang, the Chairman of Salon Films. We will also have via video, we'll be having a special video presentation today, a short video presentation by Teddy Chen, producer and director at Some Wood Productions Limited. And if that is not enough, we also have our very own Chechaleta Basu, who is the culture editor here at China Daily Hong Kong, who's going to help me ask questions and follow up with our speakers. Now, we're going to start with Mr. Albert Lee. Mr. Albert Lee is one of Hong Kong's most experienced and versatile film executives for almost 4 decades, having held senior management positions across the production, distribution, exhibition, and corporate sectors. He began his film career in 1979 with Golden Harvest when they recruited him. And over the next 21 years, Lee was an integral part of the team that produced, distributed and promoted films from Hong Kong's cinematic golden age to all corners of the world. There's a lot more in your biography. I'm not going to have time to read it all. Let me start with you, Mr. Albert Lee. Do you think it's time, is the time right now for Hong Kong theatres to open? And where should we go from here as things stand? We know that the cinemas are going to open on Friday, tomorrow, but what about the theatres?
Well, theatres, I think, yes, this is really about time that we should try to get back. And speaking on behalf of the Hong Kong International Film Festival, I really welcome the government's decision to allow cinemas to start operating again, because the film festival, as you know, is very much reliant upon screening venues. We don't actually own any. So the festival itself is very happy to know that cinemas as of tomorrow will be starting all over again. Just a little bit of background. The Hong Kong International Film Festival is a traditional kind of film festival. It's one of the oldest in Asia, and this year it would have been our 44th edition. But unfortunately, because of the COVID-19, it has to be cancelled for the first time in our history. For the last few months, we've been actually working very hard to try to revive it. The festival itself initially was planned for March, and every year the film festival would take place in March and April. But of course, you know, this year it was not possible. At that time, we decided to postpone the festival to the summer. And with the pandemic situation stabling around April and May, we decided to have the festival again in August. But unfortunately, the pandemic has returned with a vengeance in July. And eventually we have to call it off for the first time in our history, which is really very sad, because we have been preparing for the festival for the whole of last year and this year. Now, going forward, it is very interesting now that the cinemas are starting to open up again. Some of our programs, you know, that we have curated for this year, we are planning, you know, if the cinemas are available, and we will try to actually schedule some screenings, some programs, you know, before the end of the year. But in the meantime, we have already started preparing for next year's edition, the 45th edition of the film festival. So that will go on. But from now until then, whenever possible, we will try our very best to showcase, some of the films that we have curated for this year. Hopefully, audience in Hong Kong will be able to come and join us and to watch some very, very good films.
Thank you. Chechaletta, do you have any follow-up?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, DJ. It was great to see that Film Art, which is the film financing unit or arm of Hong Kong International Film Festival, you took Film Art online, and that's happening. So
Yeah.
I'd like to know if how the going's been there. What kind of responses are you getting? What kind of vibe are you getting from Film Art, which is happening online this year?
Okay, let me explain a little bit. Film Art is actually not an arm of the Hong Kong International Film Festival. Film Art is being organized by the Hong Kong Trade Development Council. We do, the film festival, we do have an industry section, and we would organize an event called HAF, which is Hong Kong Asia Film Financing Forum. Normally, the Film Financing Forum would take place at the same time as Film Art. Film Art normally would take place in March. So because of Film Art's postponement, we also have to postpone HAF. Now, HAF is basically a B2B operation. It basically, we would provide a platform for filmmakers, and also investors and so on, so that they could meet online, they could meet and to talk about the possibility of working together, collaborating on film projects. This year, because the entire Film Art has gone online, so HAF has also gone online as well. Now, we had the first day yesterday, and today is the second day, and tomorrow is the final day of HAF. The response has been quite encouraging, actually, but we are operating in a newer environment. We are using an online platform that the TDC has provided, and we had a very short time to get it all ready. So there are, of course, some teething problems with respect to that, but this is an element that we would definitely consider for future editions of Film Art, yes.
Okay, thank you. Now, I should say that if anybody wants to ask your own questions, please go ahead. If you're watching it on Zoom, you can drop the questions down below in the comments, or if you're watching it on Facebook, this is going out on China Daily Hong Kong Facebook, as well as the China Daily Roundtable Facebook. Now, let's move on to Mr. Lo Ki Hong. Ki Hong is currently the head of theatre, performing arts at the West Kowloon Cultural District Authority. He is responsible for formulating the district's artistic direction and strategies for contemporary performance, dramatic and theatre arts. Again, there's a lot more that you'll be able to read online if you go to the China Daily Roundtable website, which has the full biographies. Let's start, though. Let's go straight into the questions, Mr. Lo Ki Hong. What's your thoughts in terms of your district? When do you think you're going to be able to start opening up? Is it time now, or is it something that we should be planning for further down the line?
Well, I mean, this is the kind of question that we're all kind of dealing with and facing now, and not just in Hong Kong, but a lot of my colleagues from around the world, and perhaps except Taiwan, I think, because they've managed to keep their theaters open. I think that the question, basically it is about the futures, because reopening the theaters, of course, is dependent on many of the health regulations and really what is possible. And obviously there are discussions saying that even if the capacity is like half or 30% or, not the full capacity, there are other economic considerations that have to be thought through. So in many sense, perhaps this is a time, especially for us when we're dealing with live performance, and not pre-recorded content, that we begin to really push the boundaries of what do we mean by a couple of things. One, assembly. How do we bring people together again physically? Or in combination of the digital or other kinds of expanded virtualities. And second is to really use this time to work with artists very closely, to begin to prototype types of live performances that I think before we never really thought about. And what I mean is not just about doing performances online, because it seems everybody has been very busy doing this, obviously as a stopgap. But I think where we are heading toward is not really a stopgap measure, but essentially to kind of think and rethink and reimagine what could be possible in the multiple futures that we are heading towards. So in a sense, you know, it could be a combination of digital, live, it could be a presence within other platforms like gaming, and even other more, you know, what can be considered as more analog space, you know, like even publication and print. That all this thought of in combination could be a way to kind of reimagine and speculate what these futures would be.
Now, let me follow up very quickly. I mean, what would you say are the physical barriers? What are the problems? We know that cinemas are starting to open in Hong Kong. What would you say is the differences? I mean, and again, sort of looking at how sport is dealing with this, with their bubbles and the way they're trying to find other ways of making it happen. I mean, are there any kind of good examples across the world where in theatres that we're seeing them able to do something, maybe not in the traditional way, but in a new way that is quite innovative and new? Yeah,
of course. And you're seeing many examples of this internationally speaking. You know, there are some theatres or some productions have actually embraced the kind of physical distancing with the audiences. So meaning pockets of bubbles of audiences up to maybe 4 or 5 are kind of kept in pods, or at least in its own cubicles as they watch the performances. Of course, people have also turned to drive-ins, drive-in cinema, drive-in concerts, and just recently I've seen a drive-in into a museum for visual exhibition. So there are these multiple possibilities. But at West Kowloon, obviously, we are building, you know, bricks and mortar theatre venues, and obviously they are at the moment still bound by a lot of the health restrictions. So in a way, it is also to perhaps moving forward to think about what these restrictions are. And this is in combination to even international artists coming through having to quarantine, to fully embrace them, to kind of reinvent you know, the experience of, I think, the live. So in that sense, I think while the regulations are still in place, you know, obviously, you know, within our theaters, you know, you have to deal with the social distancing. But then we do have a lot of outdoor spaces, and this is perhaps one way by which we can also start to reimagine performances outdoors while embracing the different restrictions that are in place.
Ambassador, do you have a follow-up question as well?
Thank you, DJ. I was wondering if I just got what was I about? I actually really covered some of the things that I was about to. Yeah, talking of venues, can we not think of, you know, unconventional venues? Because, you know, Hong Kong has the combination of, you know, the hills and the beaches and the, you know, rolling, you know, parklands. Does performing arts always have to be inside the proscenium theatre? It can also, this might be an opportunity to take the theatre, you know, take the show outside the conventional theatre space as well.
No, absolutely. I mean, this is something that's gone on for a while, even before COVID-19 hit globally, that there are works that are site-specific, that are in particular specific locations, outdoors or semi-outdoors. So there are works like that. But also now we are dealing with, for example, in outdoor locations, you know, what are some of the restrictions in place? Because in the context of COVID-19, we also cannot assume that outdoors you can pack in the audiences, you know, shoulder to shoulder. There are some of these restrictions that you have to kind of deal with as well. Another thing to be said is that, you know, not all projects can be suitable for the outdoors. So in a way, now it is really the time to really expand the possibilities with the artists, to see that, given this is not going to go away so quickly, how else can we continue to maintain our presence, as well as the continued engagements with different audiences.
Okay, let's move on now to Mr. Tung Fu Kun. Tung Fu Kun curates the annual Taipei Arts Festival, TAF or TAF, a city platform that commissions and presents contemporary, local and international stage productions. The 22nd edition of TAF runs from the 31st of July to the 13th of September 2020. That's right now, with the theme of super and a lot of written characters. I'm not sure how you would say that. But tell us a little bit about your festival, because as far as I'm told, this is one of the only festivals that has actually managed to take place, international festivals that has been able to go ahead. I'm intrigued to hear more.
Hello from Taipei. I must apologize. I'm right in the middle of the festival. And in fact, right now I'm sitting right in the theater where the Wi-Fi is really dodgy. So I might just be cut off. And I think this also recognizes the moment that we are living in such a digital precarity, right? Yes, we are connected online, but also we can be defeated by this very same mechanism that we have to depend on for the future of the theater. So yes, the Taipei Arts Festival has been very blessed to be able to continue. Right now, we have been managing the COVID-19 situation very well. So in fact, all the theaters are open and all the theaters are opening at full capacity. Hence, we're able to go full steam with our program. But that said, of course, just 2 months back, we couldn't be sure that we could continue since everybody was kind of stuck with this kind of uncertainty, right? When the COVID-19 might just burst and kind of immobilize us all. And we are right now running the program with some international visitors. We have created what we call a pandemic program that responds to the circumstances of non-travel. So we've been lucky. With these 5 programs that we have on hand, we are trying various kinds of models of working, which might point us to the future orientation of how live theater might be able to operate. Of course, in our circumstance, we are very lucky. We are still able to enter the theater. So I have rejected all kinds of online programs only, which means that I resist this whole digital fatigue, which is kind of inundating all of us, but instead combining the digital inside the theater. Yeah. So right now, this weekend, for instance, we have Manila Zoo, which is an online Zoom performance from the Philippines by the artist, the dance choreographer, Lisa Hoxson. So she goes online with her 4 other dancers, and we stage this Zoom performance in the theater, which also then allows them to have an interaction with us. So this will be something very new. We are in fact right now in the theater trying this out. It is, of course, it comes with the price of having to face the risk of glitches, of lapses, etc., etc. So it is now up to the artists to kind of work with these conditions and to kind of make these conditions as part of their work. We are also lucky that we have 2 artists from Vienna joining us next week with a work called The Past is a Foreign Country. They are both Asian artists based in Vienna, but one of them has managed to come over to Taipei. So the show will be, let's say, a combination of a screening plus a new work that has one of the artists presenting live on stage in dialogue with his partner, artist, who is in Vienna, logged on virtually. So this is, let's say, like again, a kind of like a live digital model that we are attempting right now. There is yet a third instance where the artist from France, the choreographer Jérôme Bell, has written a score, and he passes this score to a local choreographer. It's a solo piece. So this choreographer is also the same person who directs and dances the score. So this kind of mode of transmission is a way, let's say, for the future when we no longer are able to travel, or in the case of Jérôme Bell, he has rejected traveling as part of an ecological conscience that he wants to kind of pioneer in the performing arts world. So this idea of the score is what might then be the way of collaboration, of what we call co-authorship in a work.
And do you think that that is something that will...
solutions that the artists have come up with?
So I'm not sure if you finished there. I did come in because you went silent for a second. I'm curious to think that whether you feel that this is something that will go into the future. I mean, you just talked about one artist who's pioneering something that would probably be something that they could do on beyond COVID-19. Are there other examples of that as well that you're finding through doing this festival, of collaborations or ways that you're combining the physical presence and the online that you think could go forward and be a sort of maybe a new genre of performing arts?
Well, we are lucky, you know, that we are able to experiment these formats right now, as we are one of the few festivals to run in full capacity. Some of my colleagues in Europe this late summer and autumn are going ahead with their programs. They too are attempting all kinds of online programs. Let's say we have not seen yet the fullest impact of COVID-19, right? How it will paralyze us, or whether some of these interfaces or these formats that we're trying out are just solutions. We have waited. Of course, fingers crossed. If we are lucky, a vaccine should be found by mid of next year, then hopefully some things can go back to routine. But still, that would beg the question, you know, do we want to return to the old ways, right? Or do we want to now rethink of some of these old habits that have actually also contributed to the ecological collapse, and also to this kind of overdrive, and hence actually why the theme of the festival this year is super, with you know, hyphens, and question marks, and hashtags, and all that. It is really to point to how humans have in the last couple of decades really gone too far in expanding his or her capacity, you know. So these are some of the responses that the artists have come up with, that they think to ease the pressure on travel and also to kind of find new ways of communication, that we are attempting these formats. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. Basu, do you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, DJ. I find, you know, one of your shows, it's called Transhumanism, I think. Yes. And there are several others like this one on your program, which are highly interactive and participatory. And I was wondering how it might be possible to have such shows at the time of social distancing. Or maybe in Taipei, it's not that much of a problem. Are you still, you know, socially distanced when you are going to the theater?
Yes, there are sets of protocols which the country has experimented with and now lay as regulations So there's a whole set of protocols that a ticket buying audience would have to abide by, such as writing down your contact address, your email, and then your seat number, so that they can contact trace you in case there's been a case of infection. Then there is, of course, the temperature taking, the hand sanitation, and initially there was what we call the checkered seating, right, to ensure social distancing. But since there's been 0 case infection in Taiwan for the past 3 months continuously, so we have done away with this social distance seating. We are now back to full capacity normal seating. But still, we are required to wear the mask, inside the theater. Yeah, so this is as far as safety precautions go. And touch wood, so far it's been very safe. We've been in the middle of the festival. We've been very rigorous about these regulations. And so far, everyone is pretty cooperative. And I think it needs the public, to realize that if you want to enjoy the theater or the cinema henceforth, you have to collectively agree on these protocols. Yeah, these are really to safeguard everybody's health. Yeah. So if you are unwilling to participate in these protocols, then too bad. It means you have elected yourself out of this luxury. Yeah.
Thank you. Let's bring in Fred Wang. Let me give a quick introduction. Fred is chairman of Salon Film Groups of Companies. The Wang family founded Salon Films in Hong Kong in 1969. Mr. Wang has been director of Salon since 1969, and he's worked with various major Hollywood film and television companies in setting up projects in Asia. Since 1985, he's been involved with various investment groups in Asia, and again, a lot more in your bio that can be found on the website. Again, I'm intrigued with how films are doing, because I presume it's very difficult to make films at this time. So I don't know what's coming down the line. Mr. Wang, give us your sense of what is going to happen in the future. I guess with theatres opening or cinemas opening tomorrow, that's a good first step. But are we going to run out of content if films are not going to be, or maybe haven't been made for the last few months?
Thank you, DJ. And first of all, really thanks for China Daily to organize this roundtable. I think it's the right time we should look at Asia-wise. The film industry has been doing well for all countries. And although we've been shut down for almost more than half a year now, I'm glad to see Taiwan is doing so well. And but the rest of us, I think we are catching up. And I do see there's no shortage of content, because lots of good content have been holding there. And once it's open, they can put on to the theater. But the important part there is why we should have so many theater, and how are we going to use it if we're taking this opportunity of the COVID-19 during this, I would say, recess time. We should think carefully, when it reopens, can we make something better for the future? This will involve, particularly with the governments, to be leading the industry, not as the past industry. Hong Kong, if you're talking about Hong Kong, hopefully it can be an example for the rest of the people can follow, is they have lots of money in the property business. So all the theater disappear, become a mini theater, and moving to a very unusual location and making people to go up and down to try to find the theater. Shouldn't we have a really good theater location? And I'm glad our Mr. Low from the West Kowloon is here. A wonderful space you have. But what about we're going to have the theater to be made use for 24 hours, 24/7. it not to waste of the property there. It can be multiple purpose, whether it's for game or for musical or for even for government lecturing and voting, whatever you want to do it. Make good use of the property. And if you are making musical in one location, one theater, what about you have 100, 200, 1,000 theater can be live linking with it with 3D performing? What about all this audience coming in are not one-way watching, but they can be two-way communicated? What about that all the payment, booking, safety, like we talk about Taipei, not just Taipei, everybody have to talk about the safety of the security, health condition, the standard of the operation. So there are lots of things need to be done. And rather than try to see for more ticket, more bigger sales of a movie, but it can be a more usage. Luckily, we know now there's no more film. Everything is digital. It can be multiple language. It can be multiple format. It can be multiple location. And this will really make the film industry, not just for entertainment, but changing our whole lifestyle. And I hope this is something for the people who are only looking for money on the property, thinking that you can make more money, but even more for better use. Finally, my statement there will be, it's not how good the film and how much money you're making, but how good of the all population from kindergarten to high school to the university, that people will learn how to not only make film, but how to enjoy a film, how to bring up the whole population standard on the film appreciation. I think that is where the money in the future, the people should put their focus on it, and you will have a better world then. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wang. Well,
I think I want to make a statement here. Albert is my colleague, we work together. So I hope I'm not trying to put too much burden to you, Albert, but you have doing a wonderful job for Hong Kong. And obviously, Mr. Low, you are a newcomer with the Western Kowloon. You have such wonderful location. Don't forget, we want to make Hong Kong as an example. Through the China Daily Roundtable, we want to contribute to the rest of the world of the people to see what we can do better. And Taipei, you are doing well. Please come and provide us more information. We will learn from you too. Thank you.
Okay, Bassel, do you have any follow-up questions for Mr. Wang?
Sure, thanks, DJ. For the longest time, Hong Kong cinemas were actually open. It's until the third coronavirus wave struck Hong Kong. Until the first week of July, we had split seating, but the theaters, the cinemas were still open. And what happened was this opened up a space because the big budget Hollywood films were not releasing, it opened up a space for small, low budget, indie, homegrown, local Hong Kong films. And some of these, like My Prince Edward, they did good business. I know the films that wouldn't have got a, theater release perhaps, they had a space to kind of, they got a showing. So I was wondering if the exhibitors can be persuaded to accommodate these small indie films, which is the local homegrown fare in non-COVID times.
Well, Basu, I really appreciate what your comment there. And India is also, like China, have a huge population. And the Hong Kong, certainly we can do a sample if we can improve how we can work together to, not just for India or China, but I'd rather to say at least for all the Asian countries.
Maybe Mr. Lee would like to take that question about the future of, Hong Kong, the homegrown local Hong Kong film industry products, which get a, better, longer run well, they got a longer run by default this time, but can we make a provision to kind of accommodate them for a longer run?
Well, I think cinemas in Hong Kong, well, they are really a business. You know, they really have to look at the business to justify how they program the films. I think when the Hong Kong cinemas sort of reopened in May and June from the first round of the COVID-19 pandemic, I think there was actually as you quite rightly pointed out, there was a shortage of newer films. Because all the Hollywood films are basically on hold, and even all the Hong Kong local films are on hold. All the new releases are on hold. So I think at that time it opened a window for actually you would be able to see a lot of reruns of older films as well as the smaller indie films. But I think moving forward, because in Hong Kong right now, you know, basically you're looking all the cinemas are multiplexes. They are multi-screen cinemas. So I think, you know, moving on, I think there are certainly a good window for smaller local indie films. I don't think that they will be excluded from any cinemas. Moving on, you know, they will have a good chance of actually getting a run. But at the end of the day, it is a business. You have to look at the return. If the film once it's being released, if it is being supported by the audience, yes, it will get a run.
Thank you. Now I'm going to interrupt just quickly because we're going to take a sort of a break. We're going to go to a pre-recorded film by Teddy Chen, who I believe is also watching this. During that time, if you do have, pop them down into our comment section if you're watching it on the Zoom or on Facebook. I'm told there's a lot of questions coming in already, so we've got a lively debate to happen after this film. It's just a 5-minute presentation by Teddy Chen. Let me just introduce him quickly before we run that film. He was born in Hong Kong, went to secondary school in Taiwan and Hong Kong, and began his entertainment career in 1978 when he was invited to play a role in rediffusion television drama. He later served as personal assistant to the star Jackie Chan, who introduced him into the film industry. Chen went on to work in the industry in various capacities, including writing assistant, directing, producing, and acting. And I have in front of me here a long list of the films that he has directed ever since then. But let's hear from Teddy directly. He's going to be speaking in Cantonese, but there are English subtitles that we have put onto the film.
我個人認為咧，喺家居上網睇戲咧，係喺目前啊，係冇辦法取代到喺戲院睇戲嘅。因為點解咧？去睇戲咧，其實係一種社交行為嚟嘅。我舉幾個例子啊，比較簡單啲嘅例子就係話，譬如你今日第一次約會，約位女士出街食一餐飯，你食完飯之後，你唔會同佢講你去我屋企睇部上網嘅電影㗎，就算啱啱推出嚟都好，你會話我哋去食餐飯睇場戲。咁我覺得呢個係禮貌上嘅。第二個原因咧，譬如一個家庭父母同小朋友咁，爸爸媽媽都要工作，咁一個禮拜啦，到 weekend 禮拜日，咁佢哋想一家人享受一日家庭樂或者出去，咁佢哋一定會可能會去行個百貨公司啊，食個飯啊，睇場戲啊。或者當係小朋友嘅獎勵啊，咁可能會睇個動畫啊，睇個卡通片啊，咁小朋友返到學校都有一個大家有個話題啊，喜歡邊個呢個卡通人物啊，咁我覺得都係一種家庭嘅集結嘅一個行為嚟嘅，咁我覺得又係無法 取締嘅，因為你日日啲小朋友都可能喺屋企放學，喺屋企讀書補習温功課，咁禮拜日、禮拜六都要出去出街嘅。咁睇戲都係其中一個節目嚟嘅，我覺得。咁第三個例子咧就係年青人啦。咁年青人佢哋有時放咗工，佢哋會約埋一齊happy hour 啊，食個飯啊，咁好多年青人都會去而家好流行嘅唱 K 啦，咁佢哋可能會一齊去睇場戲啊。咁其實嗰個戲嘅內容，亦都可能係嗰餐飯嘅話題，大家有個 topic， 大家有唔同嘅見解啊，大家會攞個電影出嚟討論啊，咁啊係啦，呢個就會係一個年青人佢哋會喜歡嘅一個社交行為。另外一個原因咧就話，就算譬如屋企富裕啲嘅屋企家庭啊，收入嘅富裕啲嘅，咁佢會自己屋企做一個家庭放映院啊。但個問題係，就算嗰個音響嗰個畫面可能係100尺嘅畫面咧，你幾個人一齊坐喺屋企睇，同喺一個幾百人嘅戲院入邊，大家一齊分享嗰個笑聲。嗰個如果係一個驚慄片啊，一個緊張嘅電影啊，嗰個氣氛啊，嗰個情緒都唔一樣嘅。呢個係一個大家一個喺個熄晒燈嘅空間入邊產生咗一個共鳴咧。真係同幾個人喺屋企嗰個感覺唔同嘅。我再舉個例子，譬如我今次我拍個征途咁佢嗰個成個嗰個特效啊、視覺畫面啊，你係覺得係需要喺個大嘅銀幕上邊，成個包圍住你，同一班人一齊去分享咧，嗰個氣氛、嗰個氛圍咧係少少同我屋企睇網上電影係唔同嘅。疫情呢個病菌係其實對我哋呢個行業係好大影響嘅。我諗唔係淨係對我哋呢個行業。如果要老百姓觀眾係100% 放心行入戲院度睇戲咧，我相信要等到呢個疫苗研發成功先得。因為始終戲院係一個密封嘅空間，都唔係對外空氣流通嘅。始終嗰個通風設備咧，我覺得對某些人嚟講咧，係未100%覺得心理上覺得安全嘅。與此同時，我都希望呢個疫情快啲過去，大家可以安安心心去戲院度欣賞電影。
Okay. Well, we have had a lot of questions come in. I'm going to go straight into them. I want to get as many of your questions as possible, though I know Basu's got a load of questions as well to ask and lots of talking points we want to go through. Let's start with a question from Mr. Pratis Pujol from the Lumiere Project. He's asking, what is the difference between the way films are being financed in Asia and more particularly in mainland China and Hong Kong before COVID-19 and after? I don't know who wants to take this to start with, but it's a question really on, is there going to be a difference in the way that films are financed after COVID-19 to the way they were before?
Perhaps I could just say a few words.
Sure, go ahead.
About this. I don't think that there will be a substantial difference in how films are being financed, but I think, you know, people, at least for the time being, will be very careful. Investors will be very careful, because one of the reasons for the cautiousness is because they already have invested on quite a number of films before the COVID-19. Many of those films have not yet been released. There is a large number of them waiting to come out. So until investors starting to recoup some of their investments, I think they'll be very cautious in actually greenlighting any newer investments. So I think that process will slow down slightly. I think people, of course, will be seeing how the audience will react, how they will come back after the COVID-19 pandemic, before deciding on what they will do the next step. But as far as the model of investment is concerned, I don't think there will be too much difference. They will still look at the script, they will still look at budgets and so on. They will still try to determine whether those films are worth investing or not, whether they are a sustainable business model. Yeah.
Okay.
Right. If I might jump in and ask a question, taking my cue from what you just said, how do you see the future of co-productions at a time when travel is restricted and there isn't much?
Doing, I think, doing a deal, concluding a co-productions, I think that will not be too difficult. Of course, I think in our business, I think, face-to-face, sitting down and talking over a project is still probably the best way forward. But, there are, more than sufficient platforms that you could do it. You could do it online, you could do it, in whatever way to talk over a possible co-production arrangement. So that, I don't think that would be a problem. Of course, actually making the film is a bit of a difficulty at the moment, people traveling. If you want to go overseas, if you want to go somewhere else to shoot a film, if you want talents to come in, to travel around, that I think at the moment could still be a problem, yeah.
Okay, I have another question that's come in, so I've just missed it there. This is a question for Fred Wang and Albert Lee. What is your view towards the rise of streaming platforms such as Netflix, Amazon Prime Video, and Disney Plus, etc.? Is it a good development for the movie industry? And that's coming from a Wing Lee.
Fred?
Well, I think the Netflix and all this newcomer is a new way of trying to be globally distributing the program. But the important there now is because of all digitalized, not only on the financing, many of the government, Australia, for example, after the COVID-19, you will see more government will be interest to support on the programming to be made, but also there will be more different digital platform from different area or country will be organizing. For example, you see the US government seeing the TikTok become too many people watching it, and they want to have a different kind of arrangement financially. But I will say that in Asia, in Europe, you will see there will be more channel of this new kind of distribution will be show up. And so the content will be not only depending on the theater return, many of the content you will have a many different return mechanism. So I hope this will, nobody today can say exactly what's going to be happen, but we can all have to watch out and help to build a better future in the distribution. Albert, maybe you can help provide some of your few words then.
Well, from my personal point of view, from anyone, in the film business, I think the rising of the streaming platform is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just another platform where content can be seen, can be viewed. I remember when I first joined the film industry 40-odd years ago, you could only watch films in a theater. There was only the theatrical window. And after that, of course, in the intervening years, you would have home video, you would have video cassette, you would have video disc, and so on. And you have pay television and so on. They are all different platforms, which your film can be seen. It provided another platform. So from that point of view, from any film investor's point of view, that is not necessarily a bad thing. And it's not exclusively a streaming platform. I mean, your film, when you make a film, the film could go theatrical, and then you could go home video, and then you could go to streaming, and you could go to television, and so on. So, it's not a bad thing, no.
Okay, we've got a follow-up question, very similar, but asking more specifically about government funding for the arts. This is from Shunan Lee saying, this is to everybody. What kind of help are you receiving from local authorities or the government during the pandemic? And what help are you expecting to get from the government side in the post-pandemic era? Maybe we can switch this across and find out what's going on in Taipei, and if you're coming through okay. How is it for your festival? Is it being supported by the local government?
It is a city platform, it's an annual platform. So our budget is guaranteed each year. However, I should have to report that the special circumstance of COVID-19 hasn't meant that our budget has increased, no. But the Ministry of Culture has been dishing out relief funding. Yeah. So individuals can apply, and then there's also for the general public, I think about 3,000 NTD per person is given out that can be spent on leisure or travel, local travel, entertainment consumption. Yeah, so these are ways that the government is kind of making in order that the local economy continues to roll and that there's continuous domestic consumption and production.
And Mr. Lo Ki-hong, how are the artists who you're working with, how are they faring during these times?
Well, this is one of the first questions we had to kind of address very, very specifically because, you know, the performing arts industry is already precarious to begin with, right? I mean, especially with a lot of the independent artists, the technical crew, and so on and so forth. So as an organization, of course, we kind of try to approach this in a number of ways. One, of course, artists and tech crew who are engaged in projects that we were planning anyway. So we needed to deal with the compensation, obviously, because if we had to cancel or to postpone, you know, there's certain financial support that we have to follow through. Another aspect, of course, is that the senior executives at West Kowloon, together with our chairman and members of the board, decided to set up an arts relief scheme through the contributions of the senior executives' salary cut. They took a salary cut of 10% up till March next year. And this pool of money was really to set up a one-off scheme to help tie people over. Obviously, artists from the different sectors of the industry could apply, you know, with different project proposals. But the intent essentially is that we can cover as many people as possible. I mean, in the end, there were 13 projects that were awarded, but of course, each project is not one person. Each project, some run into the hundreds, you know. So I think the idea is to kind of address some of the most immediate concerns. But I think in the longer term, you know, like many others in Hong Kong, is to really start to think about what are the different financial models that is possible. Because if we allow this to remain precarious, you know, we would have not moved anywhere. So essentially, it is to kind of rethink, even as we start to think about, you know, like Fred was saying, you know, sorry, like Albert was saying, like, using the different platforms, we also have to start to think about how can we monetize these different platforms so that people can be paid properly. So I think even with the digital, you know, it is really essential to start to think about that art is not free, that, you know, we have to acknowledge that there is work done and that there is value to what artists are putting out.
Okay, great. My phone is going crazy with questions coming in, but Basu, I want to give you one more before I start going back to these. If you are sending questions in, we will try to get to as many as possible. I'm not sure we'll get through all of them, but we will try to get to as many as possible. Basu, do you have one quick question before I go back to these?
Thanks, DJ. I'm glad you brought up the West Kowloon Arts Relief Scheme. I was going to ask you about it. I was wondering, and these are, I had a look at the projects you have chosen, and they are all avant-garde, very original, very exciting projects. I'm wondering if if the support extends to sort of staging those productions as well, or is it just developing? And is it for the time being, is your focus on developing on the local scene? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Basu. Yes, of course, when we looked at, there were like 300 odd submissions. We were kind of quite overwhelmed with the response, because and we know how urgent it is also in the industry. We also looked at programs that, of course, addressed a couple of points. Yeah. So obviously, given the shutdown of the theatres, it was hard to imagine in the immediate near future what could be staged or not. So we also looked at proposals that sort of imagined or started to prototype other ways of production, other ways of making, including other ways of engaging with audiences. So this is one of the things, apart from, of course, to see how we can stretch the resources as far as possible. With regards to the question of the local Hong Kong artists, for me personally, I think this extends beyond COVID-19 or even pre-COVID-19. I think it's always important as a large institution to always be there together and for the Hong Kong artists. So now a lot of what we're doing essentially also is to have multiple different conversations with Hong Kong artists to really facilitate this discussion about the future. Because I think, theaters opening and closing, this flip-flop is, I feel it's going to be it's going to be like this for a while, yeah? So like Fred was saying, we cannot assume to want to go back to the old normal, because the old normal is gone. So essentially, how then can we prototype, like for example, what Fukuen is doing at the Taipei Arts Festival, different formats and forms that can really address, I think, the precarity of the situation. So for me, now we're trying to find ways that we can continue to go on, despite what is happening, with the regulations or the situation around us.
Okay, there's a good follow-up question to that. This is coming from Gina Marchetti, and who's saying, do you think VR will become more important as a cross-media platform for online arts events? I recently watched Gina Kim's Bloodless on my iPad, and I found the experience more moving and immediate than using VR equipment in museums and other venues. Do you think grants to create for these new platforms will increase because of COVID-19, because of the COVID-19 crisis? And I'd like to sort of expand that question a little bit more, not just VR, not just virtual reality, but also augmented reality and AI and all these other new technologies. Are there any that you see within the sphere that you're working that have potential to change things, to move things on, to give audiences different experiences, and that COVID-19 may be the thing that kind of pushes us further towards that, because it allows the audiences to experience the sort of things that we might, the sort of performances and films that we're creating, but not necessarily in a place where lots of other people gather. I know that we did talk earlier on about one idea of having a theatre performance and then that being projected to multiple theatres across the world, actually, as a VR experience, or I think a different kind of experience anyway. Let's throw it out. Who would like to jump in on new technologies and the possibilities that you find exciting?
Okay, I'll come in there.
Go ahead, Fred.
No, you first. Mr. Low, you go ahead.
Well, I mean, one of the key questions when we think about new technological formats, for me personally, because in a live performance, the audience experience is very critical, meaning you are in the same space with other people, and at the same time, the agency of the audience is a critical question. So for me, you know, one of the big limitations of digital performance, obviously, I mean, between the artist, the performer cannot see the audience or cannot interact with the audience, to audiences cannot interact with each other, is a limitation. And so, you know, when we think about these new technologies, we have to address this right at its core. I think that the use of VR, AR, you know, different types of newer modes of mediums, you know, can point us to possible directions. But I think if we want to explore these spaces, we have to really address this question of the audience agency. I mean, recently there are art centers around the world who have started to create, they have a physical art center, but to create an avatar of the art center in, say, like Minecraft, yeah? And so using the game world format, where it already assumes the activeness or the agency of the game player or the audience to navigate the space, to choose and to decide what he or she wants to look at. So I think some of these possibilities are ways by which we can expand and to build the relationship between the actual live and the new virtual kind of complementary platforms, you know. So I think these are questions that we must seriously think about. Fred.
Yes, Fred.
Just a quick comment there is VR and augmented reality or any of these things, we should have an open mind. We welcome all the new technology. People can learn more, but none of this will be a mainstream in a short time. It'll take time.
Okay.
Question about, you know, monetizing digital online content that you raised. That is a real challenge, isn't it? Especially since, you know, after COVID-19 happened, I know National Theatre was kind of, you know, put content, or I know Royal Ballet, they were putting content online, and that was for free. It's like, you know, pay if you like, that kind of a model. And there was this sort of cloudburst of such online content on the net at that point in time. But I don't think, you know, that can actually sustain the industry. So that is one of the challenges, I think, you know, making, as you also, you know, pointed this out, that kind of making people pay for things that they can get for free. That's a real challenge, I think.
Yeah. Go ahead, finish. You finish first.
Okay.
Basuk, I hope you finish your statement first.
Yeah, sure.
Yes, you go ahead. You go ahead.
Okay,
Fred.
my comment here is not only a new technology, and you also need a strong production company to make use of it, and then you need to have a carrier, the internet or telecom company infrastructure ready for distribute your program. You then need a marketing who can draw a lot of audience to come to see your program. So this is why I said we should let the market try a lot of new things, but we should also see if the environment, everything support that can sustain to build up a new industry. I can give one example. Walt Disney, many years ago, started a 3D live singing performance program in one theater, but they have hundreds of theater live broadcasted, and they are selling the ticket more income than the live theater that they are watching. This is a program, a singer called Hannah Montana, and you check on that, very successful. But that requires a very determination, commitment, professional people to make a good digital program. It was 3D, the singer The live stay there doesn't make much money, but the watching on the distribution of hundreds of those theaters that they can see the screen in 3D is even more amazing. And Disney make a very commercially also make it successful too. This is talking almost 8-9 years ago. I think today, after the COVID-19, you'll see millions of school people, students, nobody go to school anymore. They all study at home. You will see the future that they don't even need to go to theater to watch it. They probably have billion people at home seeing a 3D or augmented reality program. But the important that is, you need a very strong company like Disney, for example, because they have money, they have a professional production expertise. They can make a good program to show out. Netflix, all this, I think they are newcomer. They are now shortage of program. They ask everybody, say, give me your, content is king. You still need a good content before you can get a mass distribution. I hope I have answered your question.
Yeah, well, certainly if my household has got anything, is an example of what's going on across the world at the moment. I mean, my kids are really into making stuff for themselves. They're experimenting with a lot of online content that they wouldn't have done normally. They're learning new skills. They're making their own productions. I think in the future, hopefully all of you will have a whole bunch of new enthusiastic young creatives that may have lived through these times and as a result have got a new interest in the arts. I have another question here from Alice Mong. I don't actually understand this question entirely, but it will probably make sense to you. It's saying for a non-profit with theatre space with PPE license, we're trying not to run it like a business and show non-commercial films, but we have to obey the government's PPE license rules, which doesn't make sense. Does anyone have a comment on that?
Well, I think, hi Alice, I think Alice is referring to a lot of the newer theatre spaces that are under our current public entertainment license. And obviously this category also is at the moment under quite severe restrictions because we somehow we're under the same category as karaoke bars, mahjong parlors, and so on and so forth. So I'm happy that the cinemas are opening this Friday. So at the moment, we're not quite there yet. So I think even as we open, the kind of reduction in seating capacity also, would be a big challenge, not just financially, but also in terms of how are we able to sustain the presence of a program, and also having the audience, enough of the audiences in. So this is essentially, I mean, obviously this is a very big challenge because these are rules and regulations that at the moment that we have to abide, we have to adhere to. I think the most important thing is to perhaps start to think about, how can we extend the experience? Because the live performance, if let's say you can only do 5 screenings or 5 performances, you're limited by that. But then at the same time, if let's say the project itself does have a presence on the online or in other types of formats, then perhaps we can start to really address some of these limitations that the regulations, because the regulations are in place obviously in order to mitigate health measures. Yeah. So and because we're all dealing this a very new situation, in some ways, of course, it is necessary to be a bit more conservative right at the start. But as we go along, perhaps some of this thinking will have to start to change as well, because I think something we've not talked about today is that we have to also address the psychology of the audiences about coming back to the theatre, because we cannot assume that once we're reopened, everybody just want to pack it in. We did see some of this during the short period that we reopened again. People were quite hungry to come and see films, performances, but then we were also under reduced capacity. but then again, we cannot assume that this is similar for everyone. And so I think the process of dealing with everybody's mental health, about coming back to indoor spaces, for example, is something critical that we have to address.
Okay,
if I might jump in here.
Go ahead.
Yeah, to that, I would like to respond.
Okay.
Now, that, since we are, in the middle of running the festival, as well as the national theaters in Taiwan have opened full capacity, that so far the sign has been quite encouraging. Yeah, so several of our shows are sold out, and now we are averaging around 75% house.
Right.
So I think that the audience is willing and hungry to come back. But then again, because we haven't had COVID-19 for the past 3 months, right? So I think perhaps the public here is a bit more assured. So it's really got to do with how the government and the health department of the country kind of, assuage everybody's sense of safety, that it is actually okay and normal and not as risk-taking for everybody to go back into the theater. But I think somehow, the citizens are waiting for the signs from the various health departments that it is indeed safe to go. But well, I can only say that we've been really lucky so far. Yeah, and I hope that Hong Kong would enjoy, this kind of stability as well.
And just to follow up on that, there's a question from Shunan Lee who's asking about if there's any sort of physical things that you've learnt from your festival in Taipei. Are there any specific physical ideas that you have in terms of keeping audiences safer? You've talked about wearing face masks and doing the temperature tests and hand sanitizer. These are all things that everyone else is practicing. But is there anything theatre specific, any sort of tips that you might have for people who are thinking about opening theatres that you may have learned from your experience?
We've also tried to encourage going paperless. So like we don't print program books anymore. We try to put all the programs online. They're in QR code so that this minimizes contact and touch with materials that may be, that can possibly transmit the infection. So this is, let's say, one way, which is also very ecological in the end. Otherwise, so far, we've had some interactive shows, including the audience drinking from their own a glass of wine during the show. An audience member has given feedback that there are possible dangers in this, so we have taken note that in the future that to be more that the artists should bear in mind to be more careful about these kinds of let's say like these kinds of properties that everybody might be able to to touch and hence increase the possibility of infection.
Very good. Okay, we've got lots more questions. We're not going to be able to get to all of them, I'm afraid. We've only got about 10 minutes left. There is one question that I want to put in before we get to an end, but maybe Basu's got one more question she'd like to bring up before as well. I'm not sure. Have you got a question, Basu?
Oh, it was to me. I'm sorry, I didn't get that. Yeah, sure. Thanks, TJ. I think the issue that we haven't touched today is the that of protecting the livelihoods of people who are associated with theaters, not just the cast, people who perform or direct, the creatives, but the people who remain in the background. There are, tens of and thousands of people who are, whose livelihoods are at stake if we have to, if the closure of theaters continues for, interminably. So how do you think we could kind of, do we ask the government to offset the losses? Do we, ask private enterprises to step in? So that's my question, basically. How do we protect the livelihoods of theater workers, let's put it that way, when there is no activity in the physical space?
I would like to raise a point. I really love the film that you shared with us just now, where the interviewee really stressed the importance of assembly, of physical assembly in the theaters, in the cinemas, because it is a collective ritual, right? It's a kind of socialization that all of us need. And so it is very important that no matter how grave the COVID-19 situation would get, that all public funded theaters in every country should try to remain open, so that we can continue to receive the audience, albeit at reduced numbers. So yes, we tried the checkered seating to observe the social distancing. From a theater of, let's say, 500 capacity, we become reduced to 200. And then let's say at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, the Taiwan government passed the advisory that only a maximum of 50 people can gather indoors in the theaters or cinemas. So 50 is right now that limit that's being set. And it may be very much significantly reduced, but nonetheless, it keeps the industry running. It keeps these physical spaces in use. And so long as they are running, it will keep that faith going, and it will keep still some livelihoods, some jobs, and the sense of survival in the industry. Yeah.
I think the other thing also is that
if let's say West Kowloon is going to open very soon, and then we in the festival, we are going to be part of a huge center that's going to open in 2022, the Taipei Performing Arts Center, which has 2,500 seat capacity. We cannot just freeze all these centers overnight. We must still keep them going, even if it's only open for 50 people per night. Yeah, so this then requires all governments to exert the will and review their policies and KPIs, so that the public money is still guaranteed for the maintenance of these spaces. Yeah. If the governments let go of this and think only about KPIs of profits, of remuneration, or taking back from the public in every commercial sense, in this kind of capitalist logic, it would render all theaters and cinemas impotent overnight. Yeah. So I think it's urgent that all governments must review and put in place a set of policies to protect these physical spaces of essential assembly.
I mean, I completely agree with you, Fu Quen. I think in the meantime, while the regulations do prohibit us from opening to audiences, we have tried as much as possible to work with artists to make projects in our theaters as they are closed. So meaning, in a way, we still try to maintain activity as long as the licenses allow. So that even as we cannot open up to public ticketed sales or public audiences, we can already use it to make projects. So like the Empty Theatre project with Edward Lam was one example where we could invite 30 Hong Kong actors, 30 mostly independent Hong Kong actors, to do a project with us, even if it's not for a live audience. So in a way, there are these different interim ways, if you will, that we could harness some of the assets that we have, at West Kowloon. But it takes, I think, everybody to kind of work together, between governments, between different institutions to kind of address this, across the board. So I don't think it is any one organization that can kind of address this in its fullest.
Very good.
Hong Kong, we also have to, in addition to the government, to the public theaters, we also have to look at a lot of the commercial cinemas. And I think they are all in great difficulties at the moment because of the reduced capacity and so on. Now, in order to protect and to safeguard some of this commercial cinemas, I think it really requires a combined efforts from all different stakeholders. Not only from the government, because they can only fund so much, but as running a commercial cinema in Hong Kong, I think the largest, expenditure would be the rental, and that they pay towards the landlord. They need to pay film rentals to producers. They need to keep the staff employed, and so on. So it requires a combined efforts from everyone, in order to keep them afloat. I think a lot of the cinemas, they have been closed for a long, long time. And they are all facing, extreme difficulties in keeping themselves afloat, and that we need to look at quite urgently as well.
I agree with your point there. The important part, I would still say, the government have to do the lead, because the property development do not consider the theater is their main important role for that. It used to be, if you say 50 years ago, open a theater is their main business. Today is open a theater is their subsidizing business for the property people, and they put in the corner there. So, but I think for the government, they should realize in all districts, they have a hospital, they have a school, they have all kind of public facility there, a small park there. What about to have a theater there? Not just for commercial use. Every time when they have an election, they have a big problem. They don't even know where to gather the people to promote them how the government is doing. It is their duty. They should set up a good arrangement. They used to have a taxation for the ticket money there. Put it into help general public to have a good venue for them, not only enjoy the film, but can be multiple use, because otherwise you have 24 hours a day. Most of the time the space was wasted, and then the landlord start charge you the money. I hope we should everybody voice out, not just for Hong Kong, the whole future in the world. The cinema is the part of the income, but the online platform, wireless, everything will come for. And like DJ, you mentioned, that not just a big filmmaker make a film for you. The young people who have a lots of film, they can congregate together and enjoy exchange their view on the short film and so forth. So we can make the cinema is not just a cinema, but become one of the function of the society. Thank you.
Okay, we're nearly out of time. I said I had one more question. I'm going to do it as a very quick fire round. It's a question that nobody ever wants to answer, but the audience always wants to know. I'd like you to get your crystal balls out that I said that you would need for this panel when we first started. Can you tell me what your opinion is, projecting 3 to 5 years in advance? Do you think that the industry or the place where you're working at the moment is going to be better off than it has been in the past? Is it going to be about the same as it has been in the past? Or do you think this recovery is going to take a lot longer and it will still be struggling? Let's go round you one at a time for a very quick prediction. As I said, we've run out of time. Albert Lee, can I start with you?
Yes, I think in 3 or 4 years' time, I think we will still be trying to get back to what we were before. I think the pandemic has, caused the entire film industry. I'm basically speaking from film's point of view. I think we need to recalibrate the entire industry. A lot of changes. We need to adapt to the new normal. So I think in perhaps 3 to 4 years' time, we will still try to be getting back on our feet. It will be a long recovery process. Yes, in the long run, yes, I'm still very hopeful of the film world, but in the short to medium term, I think I'm still very much concerned about viability. Yes.
Thank you, Loki Hong. What is your prediction for the Kowloon Performing Arts, the West Kowloon Cultural District?
Well, I always want to remain quite positive on things, So for me, in 3 to 5 years' time, I feel that, given this experience, this kind of trial by fire, if you will, that we'll probably be in a much better position, because in many ways, it's also about expanding possibilities. And you said it correctly, that, perhaps it took COVID-19 to really push us over the edge to really go for it, something that we've been thinking about for a while. So I kind of feel that I really trust the imagination of the artists, and also I think audiences who are really willing to try new things. So for me, in 5 years' time, I think it's a much stronger position that we can be in.
Great. Mr. Tung Fu Kun, how will the Taipei Arts Festival be, do you think, in 3 to 4 years' time?
Well, of course, we hope that the government here would continue to keep the COVID-19 management floating and well. But let's say on a global perspective, I think some of us in the industry will remain in melancholia for the better days of the past, and they may not be able to cope for the future, while others will have that will and wisdom to move on, and they will be the ones who will renovate and innovate for survival.
And Mr. Fed Wong, how will your business be faring in a few years' time, do you think?
We'll see a bright future for the future. We see that the traditional business today, people are capable and catch up very fast. And even more, I believe the newcomer, the young generation, will have a more new business model to support the future development.
Okay, well, thank you to everyone who's participated. For people online who've sent your questions, and I deeply apologize for all those we've not been able to get to, but particularly to the 5 of you who have spent your valuable time to give your opinions. It's been a really fascinating discussion. Hopefully we will have more of these discussions to come on this platform, on the China Daily Asia Leadership Roundtable platform. More webinars to come, so please check those out as they come. This particular one will be recorded, and you'll be able to find it here as well on Facebook and other China Daily platforms as well. For now, this is the end. Again, thank you very much for your time. It's been great to talk to you.
Thank you,
Thank
DJ.
you.
Thank you for having us.
All the best.
Bye.
Okay.